Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you here today at Mazel's Cinema. My name is Maurice Carney. I am one of the co-founders of Friends of the Congo, and I currently serve as its executive director. And Friends of the Congo is one of the partners, along with Sheila Walker Productions, Mazel Cinema, in putting on Congo in Harlem film and event series. This is our 10th presentation, so it's a sort of a celebration for us. We've established an institution here in Harlem. We're the third week of each October as a part of Congo Week. Congo Week is an initiative launched by Friends of the Congo in 2008 to commemorate the millions of lives that have been lost in the Congo, and also to elevate the profile of Congo itself and showcase to the world the enormous human and natural potential that exists in the country. And the underlying motive, let's say, for Congo Week, Congo in Harlem, is that there was a modern day tragedy unfolding in the heart of Africa, and it wasn't being spoken about enough. At least what was being said about it wasn't commensurate with the scale and the scope of the tragedy, which in our opinion is comparable to what unfolded from 1885 to 1908 under King Leopold II, where today, since 1996, is an estimated 6 million lives lost, but there just wasn't enough attention in it. So hence Congo Week, and as a part of Congo Week, we initiated Congo in Harlem, and this is the 10th presentation of it. So we're really glad to have you here today. Today's a very special program that we're going to have. Each, as a part of Congo in Harlem, on the Saturday of Congo in Harlem, we have a panel discussion again around burning issues that affect the Congo itself and the African world in general. And after seeing the publication of Dr. Ira Dworkin's book, Congo Love Song, we thought that it would be an ideal time to look at the whole question of African American engagement in the Congo, from George Washington Williams to William Shepard, all the way up to Dr. Yvonne Sion, even here in Harlem, the Patrice Lumumba Coalition with Ilombe Brath, who welcomed and hosted Lumumba when he came here in 1960. So that whole history that we felt it was important to address. And then of course, Lubangi will tell you, after the Metropolitan Museum of Art hosted Congo Majesty, where we looked at Congolese with a K, culture and history and heritage, and its impact on the globe, where we collaborated with them around the question of the Congo influence in the Americas. And of course we had a conversation with Dr. Walker and the works that she has done, Professor Dawson, I don't know if he remembers, but when we set up the Ndungu over here at Adam Clayton Powell as a means of cleansing the air and calling for peace, he was very much engaged and supportive. So all these individuals, these scholars, these thinkers have been engaged in one fashion or another. So we're really excited to have them all in one space to discuss Congo, both with a K, with a C, and its influences and the interplay between Africans in the diaspora and the continent. So, without further ado, in an effort to launch off on the right foot, we're going to have some cultural introduction with our wonderful brother from Congo Brazza, Andosh. He's going to come and give you a treat with drumming. So if you would come, Andosh, and begin the effort, we'd really appreciate it.
Zololongazi, kazololo bala. I got you. Yeah, 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 yeah. Zololongazi, kazololo bala. Mokolo biao, yo, mokolo biao, yo. Ma frigi, yi, ma frigi, yi. Ubaguna, wena meso. Bakabala ngababeli. Ngababeli. Yakubadingi, abakani ngobeli. Jida ibendele yokwani yawo yakwantamona. Gabu ndaterere kwa malla, kantaba monako. Chanta babingula. Uri bingula abankaka. Yemwane! Akwawele! Kara! Kweba! Mbuta! Beto mukanda. Muntama, bambuta beri bingula bala. Ngoma beri shika. Ngoma, mutansangu. Ngachi bobe kumazulu kumalweka makaka bawa bishi puzenchi tata lubaki nsangu kabakiri.
just want to point out a few things so we will understand while we will be listening to our panelists. And, so let's try to understand this thing, understand the concept rather than just words and images. But let's understand the concept. When we say home or house, let's think of the concept, home and house. Just because there's not a White House in Congo, it does not mean it's not home or it's not a seat of power. So let's just understand the concept. When we talk about religion, just because it's not Christianity, it's not religion. So, let's understand religion is religion, concepts and things of that nature. So, welcome to the world of the Bantu. Okay? And then today you'll become a Bantu after listening to all this. And then you'll realize that you've been a Bantu all your life. It's a funny word, but Bantu simply means a human being. That's what it means. So you've been a Bantu all your life, right? So we'll honor our ancestors with this panel dedicated to the spirits of the ones who did not want to die, okay? From slavery to today. There are people who did not want to die, they still don't want to die. So how did they stay alive? It's through this mystery of culture. And that's what we'll talk about. We'll start from Congo with K, which is the whole region, and other nations such as the Kuba, the Luba, the Songhai, the Mongo, related to the Kingdom of Congo, which was not just a kingdom, it was also a civilization, which we do find it present in Americas. And you'll find out how today. All right? So I will welcome you and introduce my panelists by doing a very interesting ritual that we do back home. And this time I'll pick the Mongo. And then this ritual is the power of the double. Okay? I know you're here, but I want to bring your inner you out. And all you need to do is answer yeah. And then the second time it will be yeah. One more time. Yeah. The second time will be yeah. And it is designed to bring your inner you out. So you'll be here present to listen to the energy of the ancestors through the words of our panelists. Lieli. Yeah. Lieli. Yeah. Lieli. Yeah. Lieli. Yeah. Moyo. Yeah. Bokatu. Yeah. You hear? Let me introduce to you Charles Daniel Dawson. He's a friend of mine for many years. He's a multi-talented artist, and he has written books and has published literature about Africa in the Americas for many, many years. He's also a professor right now at NYU and Columbia University, and a filmmaker, and he's worked with so many museums and culture organizations around the country. So let me welcome Daniel Dawson, our first. And then I would like to welcome Professor Ira Dworkin, who is the author of the book, the song, hold on a second, let me read it well. I don't want
Congo Love Song.
Yeah?
Congo Love Song.
Oh, yes. He's the author of Congo Love Song. And then he's here, he's going to share with us the interaction dynamic between the world of the African Americans and the Congo. Professor. And I have the pleasure to introduce to you Sheila Walker, who happens to be a PhD in cultural anthropologist, who has written books such as African roots, American cultures, Africa in the creation of the Americas. Please help me welcome Sheila Walker. All right, so we're going to start by listening to Professor Dworkin, who will be, I think he has 20 minutes, and he will talk. And after, if you have questions, please keep your questions when we finish listening to them, then you can start asking questions. Okay? Thank you very much, Professor Dworkin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for that introduction. It's a real pleasure to be able to participate. Let's see.
Is it when you're looking at the table?
Okay.
John Ross's.
Sorry.
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay. Thank you all thank to everyone for being here, to the panelists. And it's especially, you'll let me know when this comes on, it's especially nice to be here. Oh, there we go. The flyer from the event. But one of the things that I was thinking, particularly as Maurice was introducing the program, is that how appropriate and valuable and exciting it is to be here for this program, particularly in Harlem. And I was thinking about, through the course of my research, the way that Harlem figures so centrally. I'm trying to, okay. It looks a little different on my screen. But one of the locations that I thought was worthwhile starting about would be Louis Michaud's National Memorial African Bookstore, which operated in this community for nearly 40 years at the location of the current Adam Clayton Powell office building from 1932 until 1968. But this was a really important site for organizing around the Congo in a number of ways. Louis Michaud was a mentor to Malcolm X. As you see there, that's Louis Michaud, of course, in the middle between Malcolm and the Champ. And it's also outside the bookstore where in February 1961 that Maya Angelou, Rosa Guy, and Abby Lincoln sort of called on folks to get together and protest the assassination of Lumumba at the United Nations, which was really a kind of transformative moment, and that's some of the coverage there. The other thing that Michaud did, one of the many other things that Michaud did at the bookstore was, if you look at this picture there, I don't know if you can see it, but it says Lumumba lying in state. He organized a funeral and a wake for Patrice Lumumba after news of his assassination came out there. The other point, actually, that at least one writer sort of says is that one of Malcolm's most famous lines about his response to the assassination of John F. Kennedy as a case of the chickens coming home to roost was something that was a phrase that Michaud used quite frequently. But the other part of that I want to kind of mention as well is that when Malcolm said that, he explicitly said that when it's the chickens coming home to roost in part because of the U.S. role in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And there, if you can see in the background, there's a picture of Malcolm, but there's a picture, picture behind him, a large picture of Lumumba there. Across the street from the bookstore was the famous Hotel Teresa. This was the location where, where Malcolm famously had his meeting with Fidel Castro. This is from that week. That's Kwame Nkrumah speaking in Harlem in October of 1960. You can see Malcolm seated off to the side. You can also see there's a Lumumba poster in the middle there, welcome. Lumumba was, of course, under arrest at the time. This is October of 1960. And had made his visit, I think that Maurice talked about in the introduction at the end of July of that same year as well. So Michaud also sold books about the Congo. Right, and one of the books that he sold was this book by Mark Twain called King Leopold's Soliloquy. And one of the things about Twain's book that I really want to kind of point out is that it's something that Malcolm read and Malcolm cited, but if you look at the passage there, then you might be able to see a little bit of part of what Twain has based his thing on is the work of William Henry Shepherd, an African-American missionary and critic of Leopold's colonial regime. So what you have is this kind of broader history that I'm trying to outline and sort of get us to think about is part of this connection about Malcolm's sort of reading of the work of William Shepherd. And so that's William Shepherd with Lucy Gant Shepherd, his wife, a former Fisk singer, and their son. So Shepard spent 20 years in the Congo from 1890 to 1910, and he was a prominent critic of Leopold's regime. And part of what I want to talk about a little bit is his connection to historically black colleges and universities and the way that became an important avenue for kinds of some of the connections that took place. So Shepard attended Hampton, Booker T, and this was in the late 1870s and early 1880s. Booker T. Washington was his teacher for a time there. He also did seminary at Stillman College in Tuscaloosa before he arrived in the Kasai region in 1890 as a missionary, as part of a segregated white church, but on what was, for the first 20 years, a majority black mission. And he was involved in several campaigns that were critical of Leopold's regime. The one that sort of is referenced in, that is cited by both Malcolm and Mark Twain, which was an 1899 report. And in 1909, he was charged because he had sort of supposedly libeled a concessionary company and was acquitted, but the Presbyterian Church was rather compliant, had him removed. He returned to the US and was a minister in Louisville for most of the rest of his life until 1927. Part of what he did when he was in the Congo was he collected artwork while he was there, which is the basis, became the basis for Hampton's collection and really remains so today. And what I want to do is think about the influence of that connection over the course of generations, and it's part of this kind of topic that we're talking about here, and thinking about it as, in a particular way, as bringing together two parts of Shepard's many identities. One is as a political activist who was critical of Leopold's regime, and also as a kind of art collector, in the ways that we can look at art, visual culture, aesthetics, as part of the kind of broader culture of anti-colonialism. So this was the original museum. This is a photo from the early 20th century of the Hampton Curiosity Room, which is what they called the museum. I should point out as well, up through the 1920s, the Hampton Art Museum was the only museum in the South that was regularly, art museum that was regularly open to black patrons, meaning open every day, that it was open to black patrons during that time. One of the, let me show you as well. So this is a map, and so this gives you a sense of the Kasai province where Shepard was, and Mushenge is the capital of the Kuba Kingdom. You can see that on the inset in this map there. And so Shepard's report when he first went there in 1892 is he noticed 4 Ndop statues, which I believe is the statue one that's in the amazing artwork for this program, sort of floating in outer space. And I wanted to point this out because Shepard was really the first outsider to see these statues, which each represent different royal figures. And he describes it in his writings in incredible detail, what it's made of. It's ebony. This is the king is Shayem and Bulungung. Here, he has a laio board. It's a game board because he was king during a period of peace, and so there was lots of time for recreation and games, and that became one of the king's symbols. These are incredibly important within Kuba culture. And the thing that I want to sort of point out is that Shepard developed this great art collection over time, but he never took the Ndop statues from the Congo Kingdom, right? This particular statue that we're looking at, though, made its way to the British Museum. It was stolen by Emile Tourdet, and in 1909, almost about 20 years after Shepard, who obviously had the wherewithal to kind of appreciate and see what he was seeing, did not collect them. So this is a really important history when we think about his collection of art. And there's my picture of Killmonger wishing him into the British Museum to liberate their Ndop statues. But this does provide, I think, a critical context for understanding the provenance of this collection, the idea that Shepard was received as a dead son of King Lukenga. And we have a lot of evidence to kind of understand that, and I think a lot of that comes through this material collection. So Shepard would speak about this collection a lot, and I want to, this is a loom that he collected from when he was there, and that a lot, his talk about the artwork was often and frequently combined with political commentary. So I wanted to actually just read a sentence or two from the Hampton Student, which was the student newspaper at Hampton, from 1911, about a visit and a lecture that Shepard had given. So the quote is, "The story of his trial by the Belgian government for telling the truth about some of the cruelties and atrocities practiced against the natives by the Kasai Rubber Company, whose stock is controlled by the Belgian government, how as a result of a forced labor system, the natives were oppressed, mutilated, and even killed for failing to bring to the company the amount of rubber demanded of them." And then he went in, and he showed many curiosities from Africa. The cloth he showed, woven on their looms, was most extraordinary. Right? So Shepard is sort of talking, really getting into the mechanics of colonialism in the Congo, while also sharing, particularly these are some of the textiles that I want to talk a little bit about, and about ways that they influence, kind of, we can think about their broader influence on African-American kind of aesthetic practices. So this is a picture from Hampton from the 1920s of a home economics class, where you can see they are studying the textiles that Shepard collected during his time there. A cover image from the Southern Workman, which was the Hampton magazine, which also uses these Kuba textiles. This was from 1928, shortly after Shepard's death. The other images, and they appear quite frequently in African American art, just want to take two prominent examples. So on the left, you have Palmer Hayden's famous Fétiche Fleur, which was painted in the late 20s, early 30s, and you can see there's a Fang mask, but if you look, it's seated on top of a Kuba cloth and textile. And in the other image, you have Malvin Gray Johnson's Negro masks, which also has what appears to be a Kuba textile underneath those masks as well. And Malvin Gray Johnson kind of reproduced this in a self-portrait, which features Negro masks in the background. And these were folks who were part of a really important network of folks who knew Palmer Hayden, knew Alan Locke. During this period, there was another important artist named Floyd Boykin, who's not particularly well known today, but was a mentor to some of these folks and opened what he called a primitive art center here. He was also a Hampton graduate, introducing people to African art. And so during the 1930s and 1940s, this is well after William Shepard had passed away, but Hampton became a kind of remarkable place for African American artists. So beginning in the late 1930s, some of the people who were there were Joseph Gilliard, who was a really important sculptor, Reuben Burrell, a photographer who worked at Hampton for 65 years, Joseph Mack, who's the gentleman not wearing the jacket and the white shirt in this photo, was there, George Spencer, Persis Jennings, Charles White and Elizabeth Catlett both taught there. When Charles White got a Rosenwald Fellowship, and he was supposed to go study in one of the Talles in Mexico, because he was a communist, the draft board prohibited from him from traveling, so he spent that time at Hampton painting one of his great murals, The Contribution of the Negro to Democracy. One of the people who worked with him on that project is John Biggers, who I'm going to talk about a bit, who's standing in that photo as well. He's the one wearing the suit. And in the middle, I'll mention as well, is Victor Lowenfeld, who was a Jewish refugee from Austria, who came to Hampton in the late 1930s to teach, and had been director of the African Art Museum in Vienna prior to coming there, and was the teacher for a lot of these folks. The other person who's really important to mention as well during this time at Hampton is then Sumela Sanders, now Sumela Lewis, a distinguished artist, but also really the kind of grand figure of really African American art history, who had been Elizabeth Catlett's student at Dillard before she came to Hampton and followed Elizabeth Catlett there in the 1940s as well. And these are all folks who really studied Shepard's collection. So one of the students, the student who I really want to talk about a little bit further, is John Biggers. So this is an early mural that John Biggers did. And Biggers, just to give you a sense of the connection, so Biggers was at Hampton in the early 1940s. Prior to that, he went to a secondary school in North Carolina, where the principal of that school was a man named Henry Curtis McDowell, who had just gotten back from 20 years in Angola as a missionary there. So, Biggers came to Hampton, and he was intending to study plumbing. But he had previously really been, but he understood sort of this history of the Congo Kingdom through, his mentor previously. And these are folks like McDowell who aren't, who really aren't well known today, but are really important. So this is a mural, or a sketch for a mural that he did. And you can see as early as the 1940s, there's several images of looms in some of the sketches for this, which are really about what Biggers is doing is he's really drawing on the history of African American quilting, which he really came to understand his mother as his first art teacher. through helping her with her quilts. And this is where he learned about colors and patterns and all of these things that he sort of talked about in quite great and remarkable detail. And it's something that when he spent the time studying Shepard's collection, he really came to appreciate these connections. And I should point out as well, Biggers took a famous trip in 1957, sponsored by UNESCO, to Ghana, and actually also to Togo and Nigeria, and put together a beautiful book that some of you may know called Anansi, The Web of Life in Africa, of his drawings from that period. But these connections sort of go backward and forward in ways that I think are really worth appreciating. And so I want to just show you a few other images from Biggers. So these are 3 paintings. So from the 1960s, the one at the top left is called Shotgun's Third Ward. So Biggers was the founding chair of the art department at Texas Southern University, which was so he went there in 1949. The president at the time had been the former sort of acting president of Hampton. Joseph Mack, who was in the photo, was a professor there as well. Carol Sims, brilliant sculptor, who was also a Hampton graduate from the 1940s, also was one of the sort of founding faculty members of that department, or came a year later to the faculty there. And so one of the things that you can see is what he's dealing with, Biggers here, in Christie Adair and also in Shotgun, so these are paintings from the 1980s, is he's actually dealing in a really important way with the kind of African-American vernacular architecture. And you can see a lot of the connections between that kind of architecture and the sort of aesthetic practices of Kuba textiles. So to take this as just one example, this is Shotgun's Fourth Ward from '87. And I should say as well, this is an aesthetic that Robert Farris Thompson calls American Congo, Congo with a K, the use of shotgun houses in Biggers' painting. But this is one of the textiles from Shepard's collection that I put them side by side, just so you can see some of the ways that both the colorings and the geometric, so there's a kind of fractal geometry and something that Biggers called sacred geometry. That really define his work there. And what you'll see is there's these, there's this kind of linear architecture to what you have there, but there's this complete improvisation within the individual spaces there. And one of the things that Biggers is doing, and particularly in his later work, is kind of flattening out a lot of these landscapes and these images that we see there. And so you can see that he's drawing on the palette. You can see these women, both from everything from the textiles there, under the patterning, underneath the railroad tracks, the architecture of the roofs, the dresses that these 3 women are wearing are really kind of drawing on this in a way that I think is really, really important and really kind of useful for thinking about this. And you can see this throughout Biggers' later work. This is a big mural that he has in Houston called Quilting Party. And it's hard to see just because of the size of it, but there's several images up there that are of quilters. And so he's constantly thinking about kind of the aesthetics of quilting and thinking about that as really kind of foundational. He also, I should say as well, developed a collection, much of which he gave to Texas Southern University as a sort of teaching collection that he drew on. So a lot of the things that he's drawn are things that he collected from his many trips. Many trips to Africa beginning in '57, and ones that he made later on. To give another example of this, I want to show you. So this is you have an image, crayon drawing from 1952 called 3 Quilters, and it's side by side with one called Starry Crown from 1987. And you can see the images are the same, or in certain ways, that what he's doing is he's actually really thinking about 3 quilters in that image and thinking about the patterns of the textiles they're creating. But in this later image from '87, he's actually sort of, very deeply kind of influenced by, African culture, Kuba textiles, everything from the color palette to the images, but really drawing that connection between African American quilt making and these images here as well. And this is, again, an example, as I mentioned before, of this term that he used to describe his later work as sacred geometry. So this is another textile from Shepard's collection, side by side with a painting by Biggers. One of the later works that Biggers did was he did 2 huge murals for the new library. So this is in the early 1990s at the William and Norma Harvey Library at Hampton Institute. And there are 2 panels. The one on the left is called House of the Turtle. The other is called Tree House. And here again, you can see in the House of the Turtle, particularly, you can see a lot of the buildings are famous buildings from iconic buildings from Hampton's campus, but also with the kind of patterning that sort of envelops the whole picture that really engages a lot of these kinds of textiles that he influenced and was really mindful of and spent time with. In the 1990s when he was painting these and lecturing, lecturing at Hampton. I want to just show a couple other images before I think conclude. One is a quilt by Faith Ringgold called Breakfast in Bed. This is from the early 1970s, and Faith Ringgold is someone who has also spoken about the sort of geometry of Cuba textiles as influencing her work, which you can see in this example. And another painting, this is a quilt by James Phillips called The Soul and Spirit of John Biggers. And so this is from the 90s, but James Phillips is an important Afro-Cobra artist. And many of the Afro-Cobra artists, Wadsworth Jarrell and the others, from the 1960s really cited Biggers as an influence. And Biggers, in turn, I should say, cited Afro-Cobra artists as influencing his later work. And so it's a sort of works and movement that's really distinguished for, I think Jarrell called it kind of Kool-Aid colors, these really bright colors, but also really draw on a lot of the architecture of Cuba textiles. As a kind of final thought, I wanted to mention William Shepard's son, Maximilian. So I'm showing this photo here because this was the former prince of the Cuba people of Cuba, son of Cuba, King Katamwiki. It was a good friend of William Shepard's there, and this became the namesake of his son, who went by the name of Max. Max went to the Art Institute of Chicago in the late 1910s and 1920s, and just to give you a sense of who the many African-American artists who were there at that time, it's a literal who's who: Richmond Barthé, Hale Woodruff, Archibald Motley, Charles Seabury, Doc Thrash, Ellis Wilson, Walter Ellison. They were all there during this time period. After he left Art Institute of Chicago, he didn't graduate. He had studied jewelry making there. Max went back to Louisville, where his father was working, and taught African art classes. One of his students was Gloucester Calaman Cox, who was considered the dean of the art scene in Louisville. And it's a scene that produced, again, some of our most distinguished artists, Sam Gilliam and Bob Thompson, painter, really come to mind. And what you have from all of these kinds of connections and the story that I'm trying to tell is the way that you have African-American visual practices that are really engaged with this ongoing history of colonialism and resistance, particularly through the figure of William Shepard. And I think the idea, the way that we can think about some of these material connections via HBCUs, particularly Hampton, but I should say as well, I could and I have, in various ways can tell this story through Fisk and Howard and other institutions, through Atlanta University as well, that have these kind of particularly important kinds of collections. But it's important for understanding the kind of ongoing transatlantic kinds of exchanges that we're really sort of talking about here, and the way that you have this African diasporic aesthetic practice that's really the product of all these kinds of exchanges, and it's an exchange that has always been engaged with, I think, at its best, an anti-colonial project. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Sheila Walker.
Thank you. It's more complex than that.
Oh yeah, that's right here in the back, sorry.
Right. I'm not sure how the technology is going to work. I'm used to pushing buttons and talking, but I was told I couldn't do that here, so I made it into a movie, and I should say up front that I couldn't figure out how to fix the framing. I must say thank you to Toshi Sakai, graphic artist, and a colleague in research on the Congos in Panama. So he'll be surprised to see some of his graphics and what they've become. So, let's see, I guess I want to show you Congo, a little bit about Congo in Congo, the Kingdom of Congo. The Kingdom of Congo was known as the African Christian kingdom in the Atlantic world. and it was thought highly of. There's an expression in Spanish, I haven't learned it properly, but I heard it from people from Spain who said there's an expression that is essentially, who do you think you are, the king of Congo? For people who are showing off. It's something like, ¿Quién piensas que eres el rey del Congo? So the Congo was esteemed for its wealth, for its pomp and circumstance. And so Congo had diplomats who went to Europe, went to Brazil, and some of them were painted by European portrait painters. So first of all, in the first part, Congo and Congo, what you will see is a couple of engravings of the Congo Kingdom, and then portraits of Congo diplomats. And the last one you'll see, Manuel Nevunda, went to he was on his way to the Vatican for an audience with the Pope, but apparently European climate and disease was too much for him. And so he did get to the Vatican, but he died. And so the Pope apparently celebrated his last rites. And the bust of him is in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. And so that's the first part. So. Curtain is the indication that we're going on to a new part. I figured this out yesterday. So now, Uruguay. I don't think a lot about Uruguay, but if I think about Uruguay, what I think about is the presence of African nations. And in the 19th century, there were lots of African nations in Uruguay. And they, apparently, what they did was each nation had its sala, its place of meeting, and they would meet and they would do what they did. They had hierarchies, they had judges, they had rituals, and on Sundays they were allowed to play their drums and perform in the market square. And a result of that, as I understand it, is the las llamadas that are a cultural phenomenon, the calls in Uruguay. And this is my imagination of it, that people of different African nations would go out in mornings and play their drums, and they would be the calls for their people to come and dance in the market square. Similarly, there's an historical statement about Congo Square and the different African nations, each in its place, dancing its dance and playing its music. So a group called Conjunto Bantu in Uruguay decided to create recreations of what the Candombe de Reis, the Candombe of the Kings, Candombe referring to things African, Cosas de Negros. So it refers to the music, it refers to the whole performance. And so what next segment is a reenactment of the pageantry of the Candombe de Reis. And as you will see, it begins as a European kind of contra dance, and then something happens. And it doesn't seem very European anymore. apparently all over Brazil there are congadas. And I haven't seen them all over Brazil. I've only seen them in the state of Minas Gerais, where they are the dominant Afro-Brazilian cultural phenomenon, Afro-Catholicism. And it's important to note that Congo became Catholic at the end of the 15th century, when the Portuguese arrived at Soyo, and the Manisoyo said, ooh, these people have some strong spiritual power, which is the source of their technological innovations. And so the king of Soyo wanted to get some of that power before the Portuguese got to Congo, which was farther inland. So some Africans came to the Americas already Catholic. For example, in Rio and in Bahia, there's a church of Our Lady of the Rosary of black men from Angola. So they came already as a lay Catholic brotherhood and built their churches and perpetuated, particularly the cult of Our Lady of the Rosary, who in the Americas, well, first of all in Portugal, and then the Americas essentially became a lay brotherhood of African descendants. And so, let's see, so what we will see, it's kind of funny not seeing this, I'm just remembering what I put together yesterday, is in Minas Gerais, congadas are big, and people take over streets and have their performances and processions. And particularly around the second weekend in October, which is Day of Our Lady of the Rosary. And so what you'll see is a procession of one group of congadeiros, and there's a visit. So a lot of congada groups, brotherhoods, sisterhoods come together. And so you'll see first a major procession in a neighborhood in Belo Horizonte, capital of Minas Gerais. And then, and I hope somebody will understand, the second images are from a Mozambique kingdom, also in Belo Horizonte. And the capital of the kingdom, you'll see the Congo queen. She doesn't talk in what I'm going to show you, but the captain sings. And I say, what language are you singing in? I don't understand. And he says, oh, well, I don't really know, something like Benguela. Well, Benguela is a place, not a language. But I hope somebody who speaks some language from the area will understand what he's saying, because he doesn't know what he's saying. And then you'll see another Congada group in Serrul, a town in the mountains in Minas Gerais. You'll see a procession of the king and queen. And often it's actually the queen and king. The queen is perpetual, the king maybe just for the party every year. Then you'll see another person also singing, presumably in an African language that he says he sort of understands, but it's not really clear. And they're called, so these songs in whatever language they're in are called visongos in Brazil. So I hope somebody will say, oh, I get it. Huh? So, and that'll be Brazil. Thank you.
Quero te dar, vou pegar em vossas mãos, pra pedir sua benção. Mas eu vim de muito longe, amassado cabuleiro, da rainha de Abel, o povo moçambiqueiro.
Ngoma de dambidamba, era kunde posso no anjo sacramental. Ngoma no dia de ambi pompeia no samba, aue, Nossa Senhora do Rosário, quando no mar apareceu, nego vê na beira da praia ajoelhou. O branco batia no preto, resolvia a questão, Nossa Senhora chorou, auê, Branco batia no preto, resolver a questão, Nossa Senhora chorou, Suas lágrimas caiu no chão, o da lágrima sangrotou. Mas chegou no tambu gomá que nossa mãe se assentou. E, né, das lágrimas dela que brotou a conta do Rosário de Maria. Que esse rosário para nós é o rosário sagrado que nos livra de todos os mal, tantas feitiçarias e todos os malefícios que vêm contra nós dentro do reinado.
E o senhor canta em línguas africanas, não?
Um pouco, a gente vem nesse registro aí para não deixar acabar.
O senhor sabe o significado das letras?
Várias a gente tem na cabeça, a gente não pode perder, é coisa que a gente vem passando, e eu principalmente eu sou muito medo de perder a tradição, o ritual, é coisa que de toda tradição que nós temos, ainda é coisa que veio de lá da África ainda para cá. Oi, quenda, oi, cambariadeia, mochimbaue. Quenda, vamos ver a mãe de Deus.
Yeah, man. To say le quenda. Yeah, you know. Oh my goodness.
Quenda's to go, right?
Yeah, to go. I think this is probably. I mean, to me, it's like someone who's going far away and crying. Le is to cry.
Oh, and he says, "Vamos ver a mãe de Deus." We're going to see God's mother.
Wow.
That's the thing he says at the end.
Wow, le quenda. Very interesting. Yeah.
And in the first part, the Our Lady of the Rosary sits on the ngoma.
Right.
On the drum.
Right.
Bantu term.
There was the first guy. He sung in Kongo. I only caught 2 words. Then he got into, I think, Portuguese.
Yeah.
Yeah, he competed with Portuguese. So when he forgot something, he competed with Portuguese.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, I figured he was translating, but he doesn't know what he's saying in the Bantu part. So now, Panama. Panama is the other place where I've encountered kings and queens of Congo, or rather queens and kings of Congo yet again. The queen is more important than the king. One king that Tochi and I have been doing this research for a while, one king said, I take orders from the queen. So, we've been to a lot of Congo performances in Panama, and people say, oh, they were all the same. Well, that's not true. We have found lots of variety. And so the first you'll see is in Kongo, a neighborhood of Panama City. And the explanation that everybody has given us, non-Congos and non-Congos, is that it's a parody of the Spanish crown. I can't look at that and think of it as a parody of the Spanish crown. What you'll see in Panama is looks much less like a parody of the Spanish crown than what you see in Brazil. And Brazil has the advantage in the fact that the Portuguese crown spent some time in Brazil. The Spanish crown didn't go to the Caribbean coast of Panama to show these Afro-Panamanians how to parody them. So I would suspect that it's more like a continuity of the Congo crown. So you'll see 3 versions. One in Kongo, Panama City, that's mainly dancing. And the second is Portobello, which was where we started our research and thought that it was the model. We found out that it's not the model at all. And the characteristic of Portobello is the devil. The devil invades, the devil whips the Congo. Some people say that the Congo represents the enslaver who whipped the enslaved. I don't know. And the queen, the Congo queen, and this is a regular part of the ritual, has to grab the devil, and she has her hands in the form of a cross. She has a cross on her crown. So she's using the power of Christianity, essentially, to conquer the devil. And she sits on the drum and stops the show. And the third example of Congos that you'll see is at the end of the pavement on one part of the Caribbean coast of Panama, the Costa Bajo. There's the Costa Arriba and the Costa Bajo. The Costa Arriba is where most of the Congos we've seen are, and you can look at these folks and think, oh, okay, they look like Congos, these are black people. And then we went to the Costa Baja, and we went to the last village, well, the pavement ends and the land ends, so after that you have to take a boat. And we asked for the Congos, and we were told, oh, they're the Congos, they're over there. Where? They're the Congos, where? So you'll see why we had trouble identifying these folks as the Congos. But they said they are the Congos, and they have, what we found is that there are various Congo rituals, and these Congos, you will see in the first scene, they arrive in a Oroprango, an airplane. And we said, where did you come from in the airplane? We came from Guinea in the airplane, and then they go back to Guinea at the end, and they say, they use a word that's surely of Bantu origin, Tengo Kabanga, I'm nostalgic, or I'm sad. So, Panama. And now, United States, Delaware. When I was growing up, African Americans didn't have any African ancestors. We all had that grandmother, great-grandmother with long straight hair all the way down her back could sit on it. And I knew my great-grandmother. And she did have long straight hair, but she couldn't sit on it. So I thought, well, this isn't the one. I eventually went to talk to my last great aunt, and I said, what was your mother's father's name? Noah Kongo. So that sent me straight to the archives. So I want to show you some archival images of finding Congos in Delaware. So the first image you'll see is the 1790 census, the first US census. And I had forgotten, I'm not an historian, so I forgot the rule for African Americans looking for ancestors, the 1870 census, because we weren't people before 1865. So we shouldn't expect to find ourselves in the census. But I forgot. I'm not an historian. And so, and my, that set of ancestors is from small states, Delaware, Maryland, which is lucky for me. And so I got the 1840, 1830 census, 1850, all before 1870, having forgotten the rule. And I found Congos all over the place, and I found my great-grandmother, Noah Congo, within about a half hour. And then I found his mother, Maria Congo. And then the first, in the first US Census, I found one Congo, 9 people in family. And that Congo, I haven't found his first name, I obviously need to do more research, was from Kent County, Maryland. Maria Congo, whom you'll see in the next image, was from Kent County, Maryland. And she was born 10 years, she was born in 1800. So I figured she was part of the family of this first Congo. And then you'll see the census page where I found my great-grandmother, great-great-great-grandfather, Noah, and then I find my great-grandmother as a baby, and then you can go to church with me.
St. Thomas AUM Chapter. Thank you. When I went to see my last great aunt, she said, "You want to see some pictures?" And she brought out the shoebox with the photographs. And my first reaction was, I'm going to have to steal these. And I did, and I copied them, and I gave her a nice album, and I kept the original. I have tintypes from the 1880s. And I went to the little church one day, and there was my cousin Pearl Congo with her singing group. And that's what they sang. Hush, somebody's calling my name. Why was I there? Because of a name. So, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Not tell me about Congo being a civilization. All right, now we will bring in Daniel Dawson, who will give us 20 minutes of a wonderful. Daniel Dawson.
First thing I'd like to do, I'd like to thank Sheila and thank Ira for the incredible presentation, and thank Lubangi for letting me go last. I do a different style. But also, I want to start a little differently too. I want to start with a prayer from Palo. Does anybody know what Palo is? Palo is Congo religion in Cuba. It's Kong Licenza Zambi Mpunga, Kong Licenza Zambi Zulu, Kong Licenza Zambi Mtoto, Kong Licenza Campo Santo, Kong Licenza Campo Mato. So with the permission of great God Almighty, with the permission of God above, with the permission of God in the earth or God below, with the permission of the cemetery. But what do I mean by the cemetery? I mean my ancestors, with all my ancestors, and with the permission of the natural world. I want to present something to you about Congo. And when Sheila was talking about Congo, Congo is everywhere. And Congo is not distant. There was the king of the Congo in Poughkeepsie. The earliest recognition of the king of the Congo in the United States wasn't in New Orleans, but it was in Poughkeepsie. We're talking about the 1600s until the 1800s. They had a celebration of the king of the Congo. The guy's name was Charlie Quackenbush. He was the king of the Congo, but he was the drummer also. But the point of this map, though, is the diasporic map, is to talk about, when we look at this map, we always talk about the deficit model. All those poor Africans, they came here, they were enslaved. You know, they couldn't bring their material culture with them. Nobody brought their material culture to the Americas. They brought the most important thing they could have brought. They brought their minds. And they reestablished African cultures in the Americas. The problem is, if you use the deficit model, when did we stop being Africans? We might have never stopped being Africans. We might have changed phenotypically, but we're still Africans in terms of practice, in terms of philosophy, in terms of ideas. Those ideas continued in the Americas, and we still live those ideas. So I mean, we live those ideas because they become America. You know, when Sheila talked about the candomblé in Uruguay, candomblé in Uruguay also exists in Brazil. They call it candomblé. Not candomblé, it's the same word though. Initially, candomblé in Brazil that we now know as the Yoruba model, if you take the etymology of the word ka and dombe, to hit you with a black thing. It's like the black impact. Well, that's candomblé. But originally, in both Uruguay and southern Brazil, it was an ancestral veneration. It started off with it because I know these great tango dancers who told me about it. They said, well, at night, in the Shimmy Club in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, we put the whites out at midnight, and then we do candomblé as an ancestral celebration, as a dance. You know, so incredible. But I'm going to run through these things. We're talking about Central Africa. You know, why did he call it Zaire? Because he was a fool. Because the Portuguese couldn't say the consonant cluster that you find in Bantu language. They couldn't say Nzaria and Zali, which is the name of the river, the Congo River. So they said Zaire. And so Mobutu decided to go native accompanied by a mispronunciation of the word. He says, well, that's a good reason to have him going, other than being a dictator for 35 years. But this is the famous picture of Don Alvaro, king of the Congo from 1642, which is a Dutch delegation coming to them to proselytize. Now, they've already been been Christians for 150 years. So, and they love debate. That very debate is called mambo. That's where we get the word mambo from. They love those kind of debates, those kind of discussions. So, but this is already done. They did it for their own particular reasons. Why did they bother to do that? Well, this is the king of the Congo from 1884. You can see him sitting in the chair dressed in European clothes, which was common for that also, as it was from the, again, with the European clothes again, but this is the much earlier version from the 1600s, the 1800s, but still European clothes. But it's just a sign of power, a sign of wealth too. But this is in Mbanza, Congo, in the church courtyard in Mbanza, Congo, in the Congo in 1884. Nevunda, the famous statue of Nevunda. There's some discussion about whether Nevunda was a diplomat or what he was, but he died of pneumonia, maybe because he's wearing that web of words, it was a Congolese dress, but he died of pneumonia, and Paul V was the one who celebrated him and who had this commission for him to be done. Congo writing system, Bidimbu. It's a graphic writing system. If you're interested in this, there's a brilliant book by Barbara Martinez Ruiz called Congo Graphic Writing and Other Narratives of the Sign. But this is the Congo writing, basic language, writing language, but this is also the Tendra Inza Congo, named so by Wyatt McGaffey, the Congo Cosmogram. But it's also the equilateral cross. It's called the oath-taking cross. You draw a cross on the ground, you stand and you take an oath. The same way as putting your hand in the Bible. But this is part of the Congo writing system called Bidimbu. But this becomes influential throughout the Americas. Even though it's not called Bidimbu in the Americas, the influence of the Congo writing system is found throughout the Americas. Well, this again, if this is Mbanza, Congo, but in Mbanza, Congo, this is the graphic layout of that writing system. The city is laid out that way. So the horizontal line is Kalunga. That's the river, or the line, it's the dividing line. The Telema line, the vertical line, is that vertical axis means that Kalunga separates the world of the living from the world of the dead, the reflected world of the dead beneath. So you find when Haitians talk about the world beneath the water, they're talking about that symbolic spiritual world that's beneath the water. But just as they're talking about the Congo model of that. But then this direct access is direct with Zambian Kongo, great God Almighty, the great king or queen who leads, and with the direct access to the ancestors in the other world. So you're talking about the kind of power access for running a country too, and laying out your city using that kind of access too. This is the Dikenga, the normal Dikenga that we find is called the Congo cross or the Congo cosmogram of Dikenga, which means to whirl or to swirl, to twirl. That's part of that writing system. The bottom is musomi, from the verb sona, to write or to engrave. That's where something is engraved. Kala is the second, the black one. The top one is Tukula, the third is Lubangi. But this is the process everything in the universe goes through in terms of Congo thought. Conception, birth, zenith, decay. But it's a cyclical process. You constantly go through that process as you grow older. But everything, a book, an idea, a human being, a plant, a planet, all go through this process in the Congo ideas. But this writing system also goes to the American. In Brazil, there's a writing system that fuses with the Yoruba writing system. But they're called pontos riscados in Umbanda, a Congo-based religious tradition in Brazil. And the guy is drawing, the priest is drawing for a ponto riscado, a drawing point for Eshu Merim. Now think about this. You have a Bantu-based religion using a Bantu-based writing system, talking about Eshu. Eshu is the Yoruba tradition, a deity of the Yoruba, and it's Eshu Merim. Merim is a Tupi-Guarani word for little. So you have this incredible density of ideas coming together just in this kind of Bantu-based religious form in Brazil. That same writing system, on the left you see a Ponto Ciscado for Heiji Congo, King of the Congo. On the right you have one for Siete Rayo, or Nzazi. But Nzazi is, but on the right is a firma from Cuba, from Palo, the Congo religion of Cuba. On the left is from Umbanda, Congo, a Central African-based religion in Brazil. So you're looking at this incredible density of the writing systems too. This is Haiti, and it's called a veve, but a veve in Haiti are just simple concentric circles. But this is a veve that's smacked into Congo writing system. And what you have, this is a veve for Simbi Makaya. Simbi is a twice-born ancestor. Makaya is the leaves. When Bob Marley sings about Kaya, he's thinking about marijuana, but he's using the Congo word to sing about marijuana. So I mean, so this is Simbi Makaya. That's saying that the ancestor of the leaves. So I mean, you're talking about an incredible density of ideas that come together, but Haiti, Brazil, Cuba, throughout the Americas. This is the most maligned person in the Americas, the Nganga. But he's called the witch doctor. But if you know the root is Ganga or Vanga, which means to make, to do. It means he's a specialist. So it's Nganga so-and-so, Nganga this, Nganga that. But this is a specialist, using all his different types of things. The Nkisi on his left, the palo he's holding in his hand, the stick in his hand, the Mpoka, the horn, or the Mpaka as it's called in Cuba, and the Nkisi and Kandi, the nail figure right next to them. This is the female Nganga with the Nkisi right in back. This is Luango. This is Angola, but it's Solongo in Angola. But this is the same thing. This is also an Nkisi. I mean, also a priest or Nganga, but a female Nganga. This is Nganga from Cuba, but he's called a Tata, using the Cuban word Apollo. Felipe Garcia Villamil, when I asked Felipe to pose for the photograph, he went and got Apollo, because the tradition is called Palo. It's called Palo because the Bakongo believe that all plants and all have powers. The Yoruba would call it ashe, but everything has an energy, everything has a use and a purpose. So he went and got a bunch of leaves, and he didn't know anything about that little photograph, he got Apollo and posed. He posed in front of a shrine he set up, but the shrine is set up to create an infinda. Infinda means forest in Key Congo. It's the same word they use in South Carolina. The old black people in South Carolina call the forest a finda. They're using the Congo word. And this is Enrique Hernandez in Guanabacoa, Cuba. At the foot of his shrine. He's a Palero. Palo is the Congo religion of Cuba. This is his son at the feast of Yimbula playing a drum, a Congo drum. Why? Why's it called Congo? It could be Congo or it could be Congo. Congo means to call, you know. So I mean Congo means to call. Congo means to hunt. It's a hunt, but it's the drum that comes from Central Africa that goes to Cuba. Playing patterns. When you see them playing those drums, they're playing patterns that are a few thousand years old. In incredible continuation. This is a Congo priest in the United States, but his name is B.P. Washington, but he's called a root doctor. The same reason it's called Congo, called Palo in Cuba, is the reason it's called root doctors. They're called people who have use of herbs, know how to use herbs, know how to cure you with that too. But everybody had an aunt who could go and pick that plant, clean up your health, also clean up the bad energy in your house. You know, but that's the same tradition. But it now has a particular term. They're called two-headed doctors too. Why? Because you can see in this world and you can see in the world of spirits. So you look at but this is the same Congo tradition as found in the United States. It's not, but it doesn't have the same Congo terms. That's one of the problems. We've lost the term, but we haven't lost the practice on the idea. So this is a famous Congo queen. Who is this?
Marie Laveau.
Marie Laveau. Why would I put Marie Laveau in there too? She was the titular leader of politics in New Orleans and in Louisiana. This is a picture she's a hairdresser. This is a picture from the State House. What's the hairdresser's picture doing in the State House in Louisiana? Who is she? From the shoe shine boy to the governor, they consulted with her. But before but her type of voodoo was a Congolese basement, because she had a snake she carried she called Grand Zombie. She's using Congo terms for it. So there's a whole other tradition that goes with Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans. This is Felipe Garcia Villamil's Infinite. It's one of his shrines set up, but he makes the forest. Again, based on that idea of the plants that you should use in Congo tradition. Again, this is a botanica that used to be around my corner, around my house on Amsterdam Avenue, VTP Congo. There are two types of plants, with Kaya Makai and Titi Vititi. One plants that crawl, plants that grow up. But this is a botanica talking about the plants in this botanica. Well, it's like plant. You know, but if you're saying VTT Congo botanica, if you're taking you the type of plants, but Congo spelled with a K. That only means he reads the same books you read. You know, the person who opened that botanica, because also, here's the same Kenga. It means he reads Bob Thompson's book, is what he reads, you know. And here's a Prender with 21 Palos. So that means the person running this botanica is a practitioner, but he's also a scholar. Here's an Nkisi from the Congo. It's Nkisi Mbuki. It's a miniature universe, bound, tied, with mushrooms and totally which also pun on living, but the mushroom, but also the feathers represent powers from above, powers of raptors, powers of hawks, powers of storms. But this is the Congo version. This is the Cuban version. This is by J.S. Barrow from Cuba, but it's called, it's an Nkisi, or they call them Nkisi Aprendiz in Cuba, but it's called A Tree of the Forest, Seven Bells, Turn the World Round the Midnight Cemetery. That's the name of it. It gives you this whole code of what Congo religion is about in the Americas. It's about the ancestors, it's about the midnight, it's about the power of night and the power of nature. Tree of the Forest, Seven Bells, Turn the World Around the Midnight Cemetery. Incredibly beautiful name. This is a shrine for Zarabanda, Rompe Bonte, break the forest. This is a Palo shrine from Felipe Garcia Villamil. You can see the cross. The cross does not mean Christ. The cross means Zambi and Pumu. The cross means Great God Almighty. You can see the Vititi Mensu and Pacas. Again, Congo tradition in Cuba. These are Vititi Mensu. Vititi Mensu means same thing that you saw the Kiti Vititi in the sign of the fig. Well, this just means to see with leaves. It's a divination tool. It's a mirror, but it's a mpaka that's used. It's called a Vititi Mensu, but it's used to see. It's used for divination. And this is the floor where they have a work going. You can see the Fairmont on the floor, drawn on the floor with the work going on. And there's a fusion between the Catholic saints. I think that's Dolores because they were looking for a new house. So we're doing a work at trabajo. When somebody in the American South says, somebody's working me, they're using a Congo idiom. They're talking about different Congo traditions. This is Centea, another Nkisi from Palo, with an Mpaka and a Makuta. There's Felipe Garcia Villamil making a prenda, making a Nkisi. In Cuba they say your house has two doors. He's a Yoruba priest, he's a Palero, he's also an Abaquois, and he's also, he's four different traditions, whatever they are, I can't remember right now. Anyway, Araratu, yes.
Mayumberos.
He's a Mayumbero. Mayumbero is someone who's a Palero whose tradition is Mayombe. There's a lot of different lines of Palo. But this is also, on the left is Nkisi from the Congo. On the right, what we see, it's called, on the right we have Nkisi from, can we guess? On the left is Nkisi from the Congo. In the center, which one is that?
Haiti.
Haiti. It's called a paquet Congo. It's a Congo packet from Haiti, but it's the same thing. Look at them. You're looking at different materials, bound, tied, beaded, feathers from above. One is Congo, the center one is Haiti. It's the exact same thing. The fabric has changed, but it's the same thing. On the left is one from Haiti also. I mean, on the right is one from Haiti, but it's called Ren Congo. It's Queen of the Congo. Queen of the Congo got an attitude. She got her hands on her hips. We're going to talk about that real quickly, too. There's some more. The one on the left is Simbi Makaya.
Oh.
This is Candomblé. This is Candomblé Ketu. When you look at Brazil, Candomblé is broken into nations. Candomblé Ketu, Candomblé Nago, Candomblé Angola, Candomblé. But the problem is that the word, when you ask somebody in Brazil, what's your African tradition, they'll point to Candomblé. But the problem is the word Candomblé is not Yoruba. The word Candomblé is Kikongo. Ka, to strike or to hit, and Dombe with black stuff. So it's a black thing. But that's the same word we talked about in Uruguay and in southern Brazil, Candomblé. Candomblé is the same as Candomblé. It's the same, just different pronunciation of the same word. But what beneath that you find, that means that when the Yoruba got to Brazil, or the Dahomians got to Brazil, the Congo were already there. Central Africans were already there with all the rituals. They did an overlay in that. After the Central Africans became the Dahomians, and with the rituals of Candomblé now, Candomblé Nago, basically Dahomian rituals, the Shire, that kind of movement, and then later on the Yoruba come. So when people ask you about your African tradition, they point to the Yoruba model. The thing before that was also African. Just as in Samba, as in Capoeira, as in almost all the other languages. Three of the great scholars of this tradition too. Jai Mora, who was the great scholar of Capoeira, in the center, Dr. Fukia, who was, the reason all of us know, in fact, I want to go back. I had a dedication to do. They're dedicating to Kimbwandende Kia Bunseki Fukia, Dr. Robert Ferris Thompson, Makota Valgina Pinto, and Barbara Martinez Ruiz, and to Zeka Ligero, who's sitting right there, and who is also a scholar of Bantu traditions in Brazil and Yoruba traditions in Brazil. But this is the Fukia that it was dedicated to. Fukia was the one who made Congo ideas accessible to the Western world. He was one of the great scholars of Congo traditions too. Makota Valgina Pinto on the right is a Makota and Tanuri Junsara, a Candomblé Angola house in Bahia. She is one of the people who led to a Bantu revival in Brazil in terms of, instead of the Yoruba-centric word, into the Bantu-centric word of Bahia too. Macumba, one of the Bantu Central African-based religions of Brazil. Ma is an amplifier, Kumba is way, great way. The teaching of Maria Jose, mother of the gods. And you see Yemoja at the bottom. But Macumba is an older Bantu tradition. There's an overlay of Yoruba traditions. Before that, it's Bantu. Before that, you're talking about the great way. That great way, that Kumba, is the same with the dance Kumbia. Kumbia means to move a certain way, to flow like a river, but to carry a philosophical weight. It also means that. So there's incredible continuation between these ideas. They're always there. The other Central African religion of Brazil, well, the famous one is Umbanda. Umbanda in Kimbundu means the art of curing. And Kimbanda is normally, it becomes a negative part of Umbanda in Brazil, but it really is the person. The Kimbanda was the priest in Central Africa. But lessons of Umbanda and Kimbanda in the words of a Pretu Velha, in Old Black. You're talking about part of the ancestral ideas in Brazil, in Central Africa that become the idea that ancestors are always with us, that we can always communicate with them and we can always learn from them, we always benefit from them too. A Pretu Velha. This is one of the aspects of ancestor in Old Black in Brazil. But look at this in kind of, in Brazil they have this kind of beneficent look. They're kind of glowing, wonderful people to work with. Because the ancestors can be rougher in other contexts too. One of the ancestors, Hey Congo, King of the Congo. King of the Congo is incredibly important. Sheila, I'm so glad that you showed some of that material too. That's why I was talking about Quackenbush and King of the Congo in Poughkeepsie, New York. But they were King of the Congo throughout the Americas, throughout the United States. There were also King of the Congos, Congadas throughout the world, the Americas, particularly in Dominican Republic. The famous one is Los Congos de Villamella. Now, I was talking to somebody from Villamella and said, yeah, I said, well, what, did you have Los Congos of Vietnam? He says, I'm not from Vietnam, but we have our own Congo. Then you realize almost every area of the Dominican Republic has their own Congos. So so it would be Los Congos of so-and-so, Los Congos of so-and-so, wherever you are, you have a Congo group. So, but this, in Brazil, this is one of the figures from an Umbanda, an ancestral figure, King of the Congo. I mean, but it's so big that these are some of the ones Sheila and I was talking about before. There are over 30-something different King of the Congos in Brazil. But even when you look at the thing, and you look at the liturgy of all these ceremonies, they're celebrating the King of the Congo and Queen Nzinga. It's really funny because in Palo has Nkisi, Palo from Cuba has Nkisi. One of the Nkisi in Palo, one of the lines of Palo is for the Queen of the Congo, it's for Nzinga. There's a prenda made for Nzinga. So Queen Nzinga, I mean, it's incredible. You're talking about Cuba with a prenda, with a sacred object made for Nzinga. But these are some of the ceremonies for the King of the Congo, what they're called congadas in Brazil, or Mozambiques, or there are a whole host of names. But when you look at the liturgy, they're talking about Congos. This is the female preta velha. Again, I said that cross does not mean Christianity. That cross means Zambia and Pungu. These are some more preta velhas. One of the famous ones, Zé Pelintra. He's a malandro. He's a street hustler. He's the most recent one in Umbanda. But he's the only one that they call it, they have two different lines. They say linhas in Umbanda. He's a linha de almas. It means, and Zeca's book is called Zé Pelintra, Divine Malandro. So if you want to add something about Zé Pelintra, he did a book on Zé Pelintra. Zé Pelintra is an incredible figure because he comes out of a religious tradition in the Northeast called Cachimbo. But when you first see him, he's barefoot, has a chicken in one hand and a bottle of rum in one hand. And then next time you see him, he's got his pants rolled up and he's got no shirt on. The next time you see him, he's in this suit. But he's a poet, he's a doctor, he's a patron saint of people who work in the streets. So he's a Lina de shoes because he works in the streets, works in the street corners, but he's Lina de almas because he's also an ancestor. But it's an incredible idea, this very complex, and he's also he also becomes this is like the G2 version of Brazil, but he's using Zé Pelintra because he's so slick. He's in the Pachuco suit, or the pinch suit for the hustler in the streets, the white suit. But he comes out of this tradition called Cachimbo. And Cachimbo is really interesting because Cachimbo is a pipe. But it's like one of the drums in Cuba is called a Cachimbo also. But pipe means a lot more. And Cachimbo, it said it wasn't Bantu or it wasn't African because they didn't have a hierarchy like Candomblé. They also didn't use drumming, they used hand clapping and songs, and they used hallucinogen. So they thought it was Amerindian. But those things also made it Central African. They also made it Bantu. That very idea they would do that. But Cachimbo is interesting because the word Cachimbo means pipe. Cachimbar means to smoke. Cachimbar also means to think deeply. That association of smoking and thinking deeply is where you have the Rastas talking about smoking spliff and talking about reasoning. That is the exact same process. But it's a Central African idea. That's why I mentioned that Central African idea. Another priest, talk about I'm a Congo bongo man. Talking about susu board. Susu is to chop up. Susu board. And he's talking about kaya, using Congolese terms for the tradition, for the herb. Again, Central African model is also Cuba. Quaint little stories of Francisco y Franciscas. These are Congo, because the Cubans also have a gungun for the Yoruba heritage. But when you have these figures, these ancestral figures, they're called Gia Congo, Congo guides. These are stories from the Congo guides, from ancestors, grandmother and grandparents. This is the same people put in the window too, but put in a window where they've been curialized with Shango and Yemoja. They've been syncretized with the Yoruba tradition too, although they represent Congo-based traditions too. And what's that Indian doing at the bottom? But think of this is again Bantu ideas about the dead and the land. This is Comissio Indio. Why? Because the people, when you come here, the people who own this land are the Indians. The dead people in this land are the Indians. So they have to be honored and celebrated. You're talking about this whole kind of Bantu idea that becomes so universal you don't even realize it's a Bantu idea. Who do you honor or why do you honor them? Siete Rai. This is a fusion of Shango and Nzazi. So this is Francisco Siete Rai. Francisco and the Seven Rays. This is Francisco with the lungoa, the hook stick. But he's coming out of Spiritismo. Congo-based traditions that influence Kardecian spiritism too. And there are two statues of the same thing. Whenever you see red, you can think either Shango or Congo. It's got to be one of those two. But again, we're talking about this incredible fusion. This is a performance by, blanking on his name right now, by Claudio Fortunato Isuguedes. Claudio Fortunato, Spanish name, this is a Dominican group doing a thing called palos. But this is Claudio Fortunato Isuguedes are Dahomian ancestors. Claudio Fortunato is a Spanish name, but he said, and they're doing a performance of Candelo. The two Candelos, Candelo Viejo, Old Candelo, and Candelo Congo. They're doing Candelo Congo. Drinking rum, smoking a cigar, talking a lot of trash, but doing a thing that, when this performance was done, a lot of Dominicans were annoyed because this was kind of secret. This is some of the private stuff we brought out. But he was doing Candelo Congo in the park from Dominican Republic. La Madama, she's part of Espiritismo, but she's also part of the Anglophone women who were in the kitchen, who ruled the kitchen. And this is what we would call Aunt Jemima. And this is what we were taught to be ashamed of that in the United States, as opposed to celebrate. Well, the reason we see that, here's another statue of her, but she's La Madama. But she's the ruler of the kitchen, but she's also an Anglophone woman, but she's also someone you don't mess with. She's one of this kind of strong authoritarian figure. But this is why we were taught to be ashamed of that. This is from a baking powder advertisement from the 1800s from the United States. But that's why people were so ashamed of Aunt Jemima and Aunt Jemima's costume. Aunt Jemima with the kerchief on her head. Well, all you have to do is go to Martinique or to Suriname, and you realize how beautiful that dress is, and how we were made to be ashamed of that dress. But it was the modification of traditional African dress in America. And every time those little peaks on the bandana, the way you tie the kerchief on your head tells whether you're married, whether you're not married, whether you're looking. So that there's a code built in the way this costume is made too. And it's incredibly beautiful, but you watch how something that's a beautiful tradition, but you're made to be ashamed of it, like the banjo became such a stereotype. Rumba, Central African-based music, from Cuba, with Cuban terms. Mambo is a Cuban term. Rumba, jambu, all these are Cuban terms. Or Central African languages in Cuba. This is Roberto Borrell and Gina Ayodele dancing Rumba Yambu. Yambu is the singular of the mambu. So you're looking at but it means important manner. There's a saying in Congo, in Palo, in Cuba, Abrekuda Widi Ndinga, Abrekuda Widi Mambu. Open your ears, listen to the important words. Open your ears, listen to the important important issue. It's really funny because it's lived in all these different parts of the world. The very dances they're doing are that. To talk about mambo, to talk about jambu, to talk about rumba. Rumba is from the term just lumba, to get down. Just a whole posture too. This is bomba from Puerto Rico, playing the same kind of drums, a modification of the drums we saw today. Barrel drums, but bomba is the national dance of Puerto Rico. But bomba actually is a Congolese ceremony to cure you, to heal you down after some bad thing has happened, and you might be self-destructive. It's a process of ceremony done to cool everything down, to bring it down. It's called as bomba. But there's a bomba also in Colombia. There's a bomba, in Venezuela, on the coast of Venezuela, there's a bomba also. But this bomba is the national dance and music of Puerto Rico, except it doesn't come from Puerto Rico. It comes from Haiti. And because of the black scare after the revolt in Haiti, you have this migration out of Haiti. It goes into Puerto Rico, where all the earliest bombas are in Haitian Creole. They're not in Spanish. And also, it goes into Cuba, where it becomes tumba francés. And you see the way they were doing the King of the Congo in Panama. The dances are very similar, very courtly, women with big skirts and doing a very, very kind of courtly manner dance. One of the other dances of the Americas, tango. Another Congo word. Congo dance. It comes out of milonga, candombe, another Congo word, habanera, a rhythm from Havana, and milonga. It's milonga, kanyenge, habanera form tango. And earliest mention of tango was in the Afro-Argentine newspapers. Now, at one time, Buenos Aires had 19 Afro-Argentine newspapers. Who were they for? Obviously, they had a black population, but that population was sent off to the wars. That population was the one who fought with the war with Uruguay, and they were the frontline troops for everything. But you end up with no African-based population in Argentina. But also, tango was made fun of in Argentina. Until the French thought it was beautiful, then all of a sudden Argentina thought, oh yeah, it's great. But they used to do minstrelsy shows laughing about tango, dressing in blackface to talk about tango. They realized it was black. It comes out of Paixada too, the kind of rhyming duels in that. Samba, another Congo word. It can mean to pray or to dance. But it's really funny. You're looking at, and if you're talking about Puerto Rico, bomba, you're talking about Cuba, rumba, you're talking about Peru, you're talking about landu, you're talking about Colombia, cumbia, talking about Brazil, samba, all Congo words. Now, if I were to say all these dances in the Americas are in French, you'd say the French have this incredible history and tradition of creating dance in popular culture. But this is Congolese. This is our Central African, at least. Because Bantu languages share so many terms, you can't really be quite sure exactly where it comes from. Earl Snakehips Tucker, a jazz dancer from the United States. Why do they call him Snakehips? Did you remember when the sister right there started dancing? The first dance you do, the incredible movement of the hips, that's one of the things that signifies Congolese dance, is movement of the hips. Earl Snakehips Tucker was called that because of his incredible movement of his hips. And Joe Nash, a great dance historian, told me any movement of the hips was called Congo movement or Congo grind. So Snake is an indication of that too. In the Congo line in Cuba, I was asking, the real name of the Congo line in Cuba is called Matacueva, kill the snake. And Lubangi told me a long time ago, he said, we used to have a dance and we danced like that, we called kill the snake. Straight from Central Africa. But you look at the things, you see it, oh, that's Cuban Congo line. No, that's Central African Congo line in Cuba. That's continuous too. The Neville brothers, where are they standing? In Congo Square. Why do they go to Congo Square? Because the root of their tradition is there too. He has a conjuring cane coming out of Central African colored cane tradition too. Incredible too. That Aaron Neville, the singer right in the middle. Has anybody ever heard Aaron Neville sing? Oh yeah. You know that incredible yodeling style? He says he gets it from country western. What the hell do the country western singers do? No, you forget the black root of country western music. Because they used to call that Carolina shout or Negro jodeling. And John Thornton talked about the language in the fields in South Carolina was Kikongo. You're hearing the influence of the Aka and the Baka, the Twa in the singing of Central Africans. This pygmy singing you hear in the fields now becomes yodeling in the United States. The greatest yodelers in the world are so-called pygmy. No, but you get it in country western and you don't realize it's a direct connection to Central Africa. It's a direct connection to the Aka, the Twa, the Mbuti, the so-called pygmies. But how many people in here speak an African language? No, everybody in this room speaks an African language. You just don't know you speak it. We'll close with that right now too. This is body language. The great writers on this are Bob Thompson, whose book is called Les Gestes Congo, and the other one is Barbara Martinez Ruiz, who I mentioned earlier, whose book is the Congo graphic writing and other narratives of the sign, where he talks about the body language. This is called Nunsa. Now, but she's being respectful because she has her hands on her knees. But is she saying, I really agree with you? She's saying, in Jamaica we used to call that cut-eye suck tooth. But it also means disdain. Nunsa means disdain. It means get that foolishness out of my face. You know, but everybody knows that. We don't realize we know this language, but we don't realize where we know it from. We don't have the term Nunsa, but we know exactly what it means. This is Haiti. This is just a Congo statue, a carved statue. This is from Haiti. The woman is dancing with her partner. Is she saying, sir, could you please show me the dance? What's she saying? We can read the body language. She says, suck, I hope you can dance. I'm about to hurt you. but that tradition, that posture is called arms akimbo apakalala. In Jamaica, they have the term, they call it kimbo, take your hands off your hip. As a kid, you couldn't stand around and dance with your hands on your hip. Why? Because we knew it meant I challenge you. She's saying, sucker, I hope you can dance. I got something for you. No, but we can read that. We know we know exactly what she's saying too. We know that as the body language. This is it's from a funerary part in the Congo. It's called Yandalala. Have you ever seen that before? What does it mean in Congo? It means spiritual ecstasy. That's where we see it. That's where it comes into the black church. You're understanding that this body language, we know it. We use this language. We see it every day. We just don't know it had a specific historical origin. This is kabuka. You see that the drum has a circle on it? In Cuba, I asked my godfather, Phillips, my godfather, he had a drum with a circle with a resin on it. I said, Felipe, what do you call it? He said, we call it gimbu. Then I found out what is it called in Congo? It's indimbu. So also when the drummer, with that incredible drummer that we had earlier, when he was drumming, you notice the rattles on his wrist? The only place you have those in the Americas is in Haiti, in Patois, in Voodoo Patois, the Congolese form of Voodoo, and in Rumba in Cuba, the Central African musical forms. So I mean, your direct ties to Central African origins too. But this is called kabuka. The drummer's playing, the music gets going to him, he wants to go deeper, he turns his head to the side. Kabuka means I'm averting what's in front of me to go into a deeper source of inspiration. So when the drummers turn their head, all the drummers do that. It's called kabuka, at least in the Congo context. A lot of drummers do it though. This is Tony Montesero, a Puerto Rican drummer in the park with a Cuban mentor in back of him, doing the exact same thing. Playing rumba in the park, in Central Park. The drumming gets good to him, he turns his head to the side and keeps playing. Kabuka. This is one of the most famous ones. It's telema. Telema means upright. It's that vertical posture. But it's telema ulimbangana. It's tying down evil, upholding good. A lot of the Nkisi and Kandi, when you see those statues, they're either in this posture. They're either arms akimbo or pakalala, or they're telema. Tying down evil, upholding good. It could be a spear, it could be a knife, it could be many different things. And that hat is a hat of claws, a hat of leopard claws. Means royal authority too. But this is the Congo version of the entirety of the stone statue called Teleba. This is a parade going through Haiti. It's the Major Jacques. He's in that posture and with a hand on the hip twirling a baton. Baton twirling is, I don't know if it's a Haitian invention, but it's also an African-American invention. The home of baton twirling is in Louisiana and Mississippi. All you have to do is look up the dissertations written on the African-American origin of baton twirling. So you understand that there's a direct connection. But in Haiti, this posture of tying your hand on your hip, twirling baton, and marching down the street in the Major Jacques is called a posture Congo. In Haiti, they know exactly where it comes from. It goes into the black marching bands of the United States, where the marching bands were the drum majors and the position created by African Americans. But again, it was used to make fun of African Americans too, tying down evil, upholding good. But it's part of that Congo pose that goes directly from the Congo through Haiti into the southern United States, into the marching bands, to that posture. So when you have a University of Mississippi major drum, doesn't know she's doing the posture Congo, the pose Congo pose, in a stadium at the time that was probably all white, except for the black people who had to clean up after the parade was over too. So but that's a real metaphor for Central African ideas, for Congolese ideas in the Americas. One of the last entities I want to give you, this is an entity from the Congo, from Thompson's book, Le Geste Congo. But again, this is the king sitting in a posture called Lumbu, the closed leg posture, head averted in kabuka for deeper thought, but smoking a pipe, the pipe being the pipe of the king before, that is the repository of his ideas and his philosophy. So hopefully when he smokes, he will have vision and understanding the depth of the king before him when he's smoking too. Again, and this is the last slide. This is the statue of the king of the Congo from Congo. This is a statue of the king of the Congo from Mbanda, from Brazil, sitting in a posture with a red cloth across his shoulder, smoking a pipe for deeper thought. And I hope that we understand how deep Congolese thought really is in the Americas too. And this could just be like the tip of the iceberg of what we're talking about. We could go out through the Americas, we could identify these ideas in almost every country in the Americas, particularly in the music and dance forms too. Thank you for your patience. Well, thank you very much, Darren.
So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, we can bring the
This-
panelists
yeah,
up.
you can come back
Yeah,
here.
I'll move it.
So, any question?
Oh,
Yes.
Well, first, thank you all for your presentation. I was actually just invited here, so it was so important to me. My question, as a person native to this country, Black person from DC with South Carolina roots, so I really appreciated. I wanted to ask you a question about the language, because there was one of the symbols that you shown that I just sketched randomly. I like to just, I just would randomly sketch things. It was a particular one with it's like the line went here, it went down, went this way. It was almost like, I don't want to say swastika, but it wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's the decanter, yeah.
Yeah, what does that one mean? I want to know that one.
Well, that's, oops, this one. This way.
Ross, actually go back to the, sorry.
It's me.
I really appreciate, I really appreciated your connection with the thought and the writing. And I don't believe in coincidences, because I actually just came here to Harlem. My father was an AME Zion pastor, and so I went to Spelman and I studied history. And I literally just moved here a couple blocks away, and Census invited me in. And but I'm specifically looking in doctoral programs right now to do history, but related to those roots, in South Carolina, like you were talking about, on up through DC, et cetera. But connecting those religious, cultural, transcultural migration. This is like the perfect panel for me. And so I just kind of wanted to pick your brain, but I really wanted to, I would like to get more references, thank you, as I look into it. But really specifically, I was asking about that language, because that was very interesting, because I just sketched that randomly, like all my life, and I wanted to know about it.
Barbara Martinez Ruiz.
Barbara Martinez Ruiz.
Called Congo Graphic Writing and Other Narratives of the Time.
Okay. Congo Graphic Writing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you again for my discussion. My father is actually from Angola, brother Congo, so I'm half from Congo. And this is more a question about like mainstream media. For example, when you talked about Latin America, those African descent, as a child, watching media, it's always more of like the European descent that I always see. I wouldn't really see more of the African descendant people. And I know that I think it's when I was watching PBS with Henry Whiskers Jr., that specifically talked about those of African descent, but I also watch channels directly from Latin America, and I still see more like a European descent population. I could be wrong, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. I still don't see a lot of Afro-Latinos represented properly in Spanish-speaking America. I want to know what is your reaction to that, with your commentary about that.
The Americas are based on the genocide of the indigenous people and the enslaving of Africans. And that heritage is visible in the media, that heritage is perpetuated in educational systems or miseducational systems, as Carter G. Woodson said, the founder of African American History Month. Some of the images of African descendants in some Latin American countries are just amazing. There has not been any kind of serious critique, and they don't have the structures that whenever such images come out, they, the NAACP says, things, don't buy this stuff, boycotts and things. But by and large, that hasn't happened because, some of the populations are just recently learning their stories. They have been organizing, but since like the 90s, essentially, if you look at most of the countries in Latin America. So there are terrible stereotypes. In Ecuador, there's some restaurant, I don't remember its name, maybe I am repressing its name, but its symbol is an African with a bone in his nose or a bone in his hair. Yeah. Now, there was an ad for some fast food thing, and they had some image of a black person and said, "You eat like a cannibal," or something like that. I mean, there are these grotesque images that continue to exist, and the media images, novellas and such, the African descendants are what? Prostitutes, gangsters, mammies, standard images. So it takes a while to critique those, and first one has to become aware that one needs to critique them.
Another question?
But there's progress, especially in Brazil, where the population has been acknowledged to be 54% of African descent based on self-identification and no one-drop rule.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that this connecting to what the young man was saying just now is that I thought it also interesting, given what he's saying about how in Caribbean and Latin America, well, particularly Spanish-speaking in America, it's difficult for them to accept their African roots, and yet you were saying how in Dominican Republic they use the word Congo in some reference to some of their music and dancing, and so that always that always confuses me a little bit when I hear that sort of thing, knowing that they have trouble accepting that their ancestry, but yet still make those references in some of the things that they do. And so I just wanted to kind of get some feedback about that. My sister and I, by the way, lived in Congo for a long time.
Oh, wow.
And our stepfather was from Angola. He was in Bundu. So anyway,
It's just interesting when you say that. When Darren Dawson finished his talk, I said malembe, malembe, and then you said
Malembe, 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 no ma San Juan se viene, San Juan se va. A song from San Juan, Kongo, the mulatto phallic saint in Venezuela.
Yeah, but that's also the standard song in Palo. Malembe, malembe. Smooth.
Yeah.
Very interesting, yeah. Okay, another question. I think you have a question.
Yes. Well, there are a couple of things. One, there's a town in Mississippi called Congo, Mississippi. I never, my teacher used to always, when he would introduce me, he would say, and this is Rehema, she's from Congo, Mississippi, because I'm from Mississippi.
Right.
But I never knew there was a place called Congo, Mississippi until about 3 years ago. I was in DC and I mentioned it to someone, this brother from Cameroon, and he said, oh, I know that place. I said, no, my teacher always said that. He just and he said, check it out when you go home. And I checked it out, and it is a city called Congo in Mississippi. And
Like Angola prisoners.
Yeah.
well, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, one night I was online and I decided I was going to look up where are the slave ships. If it was all these slave ships, like where are they? Are there remnants? Are they some wrecked somewhere at the bottom or somewhere? And what I found was this young man had done all this research about the Americas and African presence here prior to the slave raids. And at the time, I had just, Fali Ipupa had just done Iloko Oyo. And on the beginning of the video, the music video, he steps off of a boat with his feather like this. And the pictures that this brother, these paintings that he found were people with these feather pieces and the raffia, just like what Fali Ipupa has on his music video. And they're not slaves. It's clear that they're not slaves. Like it's pictures of, it's paintings with the men standing like this and a woman standing like that, and there's this white man down, and they have this paper on the ground, and they're all standing around. And it's nothing that is indicative of slavery. And it was several different paintings that were done. So I was wondering if you had any information about that. People that they showed images that looked like, dressed like people from Congo, and also there were images of people dressed like the soft woven cotton like Ethiopian, but like the black women had gold on, and like one picture it was a black woman, it was two black women and a white woman, and the white woman had no shoes on, and the black women looked like, they had their headdresses and they had gold jewelry on, and they had, they were fully dressed.
You know where it was from?
I know that some of the paintings were from the islands.
From Dominica.
I don't remember Dominique, but I know that there were a couple of them that were from different islands, but it was the Americas.
Yeah, there are Congo towns and Congo places with African place names all over. Toshi did a map that he called the map of Nueva Africa, And we've been to several places called Congo, El Congo, Mandinga. There are at least 4 Congo rivers in Panama. My impression is that Congo is the African word most used in the Americas, and it's used for all kinds of things. Congo peas, in Haiti, Congo. In Panama, there are expressions, no seas un Congo, don't be stupid. Congo meaning stupid, but then there's also no te dejes conguear, don't let yourself be Congo, which suggests that maybe the Congo's not quite so stupid. But so the presence of that word is amazing. Also in Panama, there's a wasp, the one that bites hardest is called a Congo. The ant that bites hardest is called a Congo. The pepper that's the hottest, ají Congo. So that word is just all over the place. With respect to people not knowing in Latin America about their Africanity, there's an area near Cali in the northern Cauca Valley on the Pacific coast of Colombia where there's an amazing concentration of African terms, names, family names. Casaman, Mandinga, Dahomey, lots of Congos. And I've asked people, well, can you explain your name to me? Puro Castellano, pure Castilian. And this just happened. I was in Colombia last week and I met somebody named Biafara. And I said, so what does that mean? Oh, but I don't really know. So we got a lot of learning to do about the Africanity all over the place. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing about the clothing. There, recently, not recently really, but they found out that there was a collection of African clothing that were kept in a collection in Vatican, in Italy, which belonged once by the Medici.
Medici.
Yeah, Medici, yeah, it was powerful. And
who was also black.
He was.
Kept where?
In Italy, Vatican, yeah. So they were made out of, some of them were made out of raffia, like really refined raffia, and also pineapple fiber. And that, it looks like silk when you see it, pineapple, yeah. And that's actually what the king of Congo was wearing. Nothing to do with Europe. The Fumotsi, that's how they used to call them. Fumotsi, they used to wear that. It was made out of raffia, like refined model of raffia, which you don't really see today. And then also the top.
Oh, that naval one.
Yes, the top. Just like this one. Yeah, that one was made out of pineapple fiber. I've seen it. It's unbelievable, beautiful. It was beautifully done. Did you get to see that Majestic? It was actually, they had like 4 models in that exhibit. Of course, the Met did not keep it. They returned to the collection. So I just wanted to say that.
I think it's something to question, in terms of the presence of Africans here and of black people here. We don't question it so much. We have the idea that everybody was brought over here, except maybe a few from Europe. But we have that idea. When I saw that, it just, it clicked like, wow. I remember reading this, I can't remember the sister's name that wrote the book, Criminalization of a Race. And she talked about Africans that were free here and how when they decided that all black people were gonna be slaves, that there were free people, and that was how they came up with the whole idea of prisons. What's it called? Yeah, prisons. There was a name I can't remember the name of it, but it was how they came up with prisons to lock people up because they had to do something with these people who had been here free.
Yeah, there's a lot of recent work in that too, because when you talk about Native Americans, A lot of the Native Americans might have been black.
Like in New Orleans?
Yeah, no, but I mean black because black people populated the whole world. When you see the old photographs of the old people who were in the southern South America, the tip of South America, they look like they're from the Congo. This is an indigenous group that's from South America. You know, so, but I wouldn't be surprised because then you go to the Andaman Islands, you go all through Southeast Asia too. There's also always a black population there earlier, because you might be just talking about the people who originally came out of Africa and populated the whole planet, and then there's an overlay of them. You know, but there were always black people here too.
All right. And another question, yes, Maurice.
No, go.
My name is Abigail. I'm from Congo. And it's not so much of a question, it's just a bit of my experience. I was raised in the Congo and then I came here for university. And I've never realized I've never been more aware of my Africanness or my blackness until I got to America. And one thing I've realized is that it's very empowering to learn about pre-slavery black history. Yeah. For me personally, when I was in primary school, which is elementary and middle school, we were taught about our history before slavery. And it was simple things like how our ancestors survived, what they did, how they lived basically. And to add to your question about pre-slavery American black history, I'd encourage you to look into Mansa Musa. I know there's an American criminal named Mansa Musa, but not that one. He was an emperor of the Mali Empire, which is a West African empire. And he's said to have sent ships with tons of gold to the Americas and just looking.
No, Mansa Musa did that. Abubakar.
Okay.
Abubakar before him said.
Okay.
Yeah. Before Abubakar was king before Mansa Musa, who decided to cross the ocean, the Atlantic, and then they say he sailed with probably like 2,000 boats. 2,000 boats, yeah, big boat, yeah. So, but he never returned. I mean, he never returned, and I wouldn't be surprised to find out that. I mean, there's a book by I think Van Serra.
Van Serra did it too.
Right.
Yeah,
So
but there's a lot of work after that.
I mean, I said to myself, probably.
They came before Columbus. I have lots of information like that, but just that these people were negotiating at the time of the slave raids, that was what was interesting to me, and that it was actually black people that were looking like they came from Congo at 16 and 1700s. That's just surprising to me.
Oh, okay. Nelson?
We've talked a lot about the way that Congolese culture has sort of come over and permeated in the Americas. I'm wondering if any of you could speak to the movement of culture in the other direction, in terms of the exchange of ideas, and in what ways might we see that happening?
In terms of.
I mean, like we think about rumba, for example. Passing to Cuba and then back.
Well, that happened, yeah. That's one of the important things. Because in fact, Lubangi used to joke about that when they would hear some of the songs. I'd say, that's really thing, that sounds like it came from here. And everybody would laugh at him and say, no, and then it turned out it did. It came exactly from there. But rumba went back to, but even, I just want to talk also about how Africans influenced the Americas, and we don't even get credit for it too. Right. Like the first non-indigenous republics in the Americas were African. Because the European colonies, they were colonies. Their homeland was Spain, their homeland was France. The first ones to stop that were Africans. And so there's the Quilombo dos Palmares in 1600. There's a Yanga in Brazil, which is 1600. In the Panama, Toshi's film and Sheila's film about that. They're all throughout the Americas. You have non-indigenous republics. These are Africans giving the model that you can be independent of Europeans. So you end up with, right, yeah. You end up with 100 years before there's a United States. You have a Palmares, and they know about Palmares. They knew about Haiti Haiti is the first non-indigenous island too, like that. But they knew about it because it was seditious to even talk about it. You couldn't talk about that though. But they used the ideas too. So even though there's no United States, there are these independent African nations in Latin America and in Mexico and in areas, it wasn't even Mexico, it was New Spain, it wasn't even New Spain, it was Amerindian land that the Spanish were fighting over. And you already have an African republic there, so.
I'm sorry, I just want to add that it's also a Bantu model to wherever there's a group of people, they have to be a seat of power. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if King of Congo over here, King of Congo over there. It's a Bantu model. Where
that's one of the strongest models in America.
You'll find, wherever there's a group, even if it's only, 100, they just have to have a seat of power, which it's when you look at the tenders of Congo, the begin with a circle. So it comes to, there's something has to glue everybody together.
Right.
That's what, people will call it a king, but in reality, that's what it brings everybody together. So it's a Bantu model to find it throughout, Central Africa, all the way down to South Africa as well. Zeka, I think you want.
Thank you for the beautiful talking. I learned a lot with everyone, and I just, it's not a question, but it's an observation that in the film that I guess is in Central America, that there is a couple playing like the devil and this is exactly the same dance that we call it lundu, that I found. The lundu was an old style of dance, Afro dance in Brazil, in 19th century or 18th century. But I found in Pará the same dance. I filmed and I give to you, because using the skirt, and it's a kind of seductive, but at the same time it's like no, you cannot go if I don't want. I seduce you, but it's my wish. I seduce you, but it's my wish. It's the same. And I noticed also Danny also talk about quilombos. And I'm researching a little more about quilombos, because we know in Brazil the big quilombo to Palmares, that's almost 100 of years. It's like a republic in the 16th century. But now they are researching more, is like more than 100 of quilombos only in Amazon area. And then we have a lot of people who are talking other languages that we don't know. And it's incredible, because our research is always is the same area. It's Salvador, Rio, because it's the biggest centers, no? And also another thing that's very interesting, because we have 500 of years of Congo Bantu people in the Americas, and we have just 100 years of Yoruba, but Yoruba became prominent. And people don't consider Congo culture so important, no? But if you go in the rituals, like you have in Umbanda, or even Tambor de Mina, that is from Amazon area, you see caboclos, all the gesture, Congo gesture that Thompson has studied is there. And that's amazing, because they don't talk about African, but they talk about Amerindian spirits, but the body is there, the language body is there. And also I remember the definition of the performance, the African performance by Foucault. They say that's the indivisible trio, singing, drumming, and dancing. Yes. And this is true. Yes. All around South America, all around Central America. And I believe that's a great contribution, because this is very strong. It's very strong in different kinds of traditions, but it's there, and they are always telling a story also, like you have here. I'd like to know about what they sing in the beginning, because it's so beautiful. I filmed it, and I'd like to use this image because it's so fantastic. And well, I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you very much for the
You should actually look at some of Zeker's books that have been translated into English too. He has a book, Introduction to Congo, Introduction to Umbanda, which have been done by Africa Diasporic Press too. Diasporic Africa Press.
Yeah, there was a last
last
question. Yes.
So Professor Dworkin, you had Langston Hughes and other figures speaking about the Congo.
Yeah.
What is it that inspired them across the board? Can you share with us? Is it one thing or historic event moment?
My sense and feeling is that it's a combination of, I think, a lot of the kind of cultural history that my colleagues have been talking about, as well as coming out of a very particular kind of political history, right? And so when someone like William Shepard, who I talked about, came back to the US in 1910, he was speaking at HBCUs, he was speaking at churches. James Weldon Johnson would organize an NAACP meeting on Africa in New York, right? Which is the year before Hughes writes Negro Speaks of Rivers, right? The Crisis is reporting on these events. We know that Hughes subscribed to the Crisis, right? So it's really sort of circulating through all of those networks in a lot of ways. I mean, it's circulating through networks, particularly of African students at HBCUs. It's circulating through Black newspapers and Black magazines in the U.S., right? And so I think part of the particular project that I'm kind of interested in is the way that we see a lot of the figures who I'm sort of talking about, who aren't particularly well known, were really deeply embedded within their kinds of communities. And so I think that's an important part of this story as well. And so so these are folks who are really, they knew Congolese folks. They followed this, they were engaged. Very much so from the early 20th century. It was a sort of touchstone in political, in really kind of international political thought, political history, as part of a broader campaign against anti-imperialism through the Pan-African Congresses in 1919, 1921 as well. People like Jesse Fawcett got to travel and met people like Paul Panda, during this time as well. So these networks are really kind of deep in, I think, a lot of the ways that, everyone's been talking about, but also very kind of political. Just maybe, and when one other person, maybe I'll just mention, I was thinking about it with the previous question, is there's, one of the people I talk about is an African-American linguist named Althea Brown Edmiston, who spent nearly 40 years in the Congo, beginning in 1903. And one of the things that she did was she wrote the first Bouchon dictionary, and she did it at a time that was actually really controversial because the colonial authorities were really trying to do whatever they could to they just wanted to make Chaluba the regional kind of lingua franca, right? So any other kind of languages, and it was African American missionaries who were sort of involved in trying to preserve this. But part of what Edmiston and her colleagues did was, once they actually developed the Chaluba hymnal, the Presbyterians did, they began to incorporate African American spirituals translated into Chaluba and put them into the hymnals. And they're still a part of the hymnal that you can buy in Kananga today. And so, again, so folks are really kind of engaged through, actual kinds of travels, through HBCUs, through the Black press, and through these kinds of church institutions in ways that I think are really kind of grounded in foundation.
Any exhibition in the future?
What's that?
Any exhibition.
Into sort of traveling exhibits and bringing in folks, to speak about the kind of legacy and history there as well. But Hampton is really a kind of special place for a lot of this material.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a book by Winifred Ross called the African Heritage of American English.
Yeah.
And she talks a lot about the words we talked about. She also has a map where she shows all these Bantu place names in the American South, five southern states. So the places they thought were Amerindian names are indigenous names, they turn out to be Bantu names, Bantu place names in the American South.
And she's a white former American Presbyterian Congo mission, actually, as well, who raised her children in the mission station that Shepard founded, actually. Vass did. So.
Yeah, she grew up in the Congo, and also she's fluent in Luba. So.
Yeah.
What is her name again?
Winifred Vass, V-A-S-S. She and Joseph Holloway did the book on linguistics in African language.
Last word from Sheila.
I have a lot of visuals. Everything you saw were my visuals from my various wanderings in Africa and the global African diaspora. And I was digitizing everything, but without looking at them because I figured I'd never finish the digitizing if I stopped to watch. And one evening I thought, I should see what I have. This may be terrible. I may be wasting time doing this. And so I just kind of looked at things in a random manner. And what I found was that we are indeed always singing, dancing, and playing drums or some kind of percussion. And my first thought was, oh, the stereotype is true. But then, fortunately, I have a book from one of the Pan-African music festivals in Congo, Brazzaville. And there's an article in one of them written by a Congo who's a Congolese. So he's a Mukongo, and he's a Congolese from Congo, Brazzaville. And what he talks about is Congos dancing in Congo Square in Louisiana. And he talks about, in French, faire la bamboula it's to party, but it's also one of those instances in which an African word is used to mean disorder, like candombe is used to represent disorder in the southern cone of South America. And so, faire la bamboula, or to be a bamboula, can be used in a very insulting way. And so the author of this article, Honoré Mobonda, talks about the Congos dancing what they called bamboula in Congo Square. And he said what they were saying is, and if the French understood this word, they might think differently about it. He said what they were saying was, we are dancing so as to remember our ancestors. We are dancing to remember where we come from. We're dancing not to forget.
You know, there's a whole thing done by Alex Lasaya. He has a group called Amamoyo, who's a bomba group, and he was also taught by Fouquier about the word bambula. And they do a whole, because there are like 5 basic rhythms in bomba, but those 5 basic rhythms were also in the American South. So there's a shared kind of literature to him. Who's the great pianist? He just died. He's a New Orleans pianist. Henry Brad, not Henry.
Randy with
No, not Randy. He's from New Orleans. He was a blind piano player from New Orleans, and he's an incredible musician. But he said one day, whenever you hear that New Orleans sound, what you're hearing is bambula. You're always hearing bambula. The root of our feeling that sound. You can recognize New Orleans feeling. He said that's bambula. But bambula, in terms of the way Fouquier taught it, was bambula is the re-remembering.
Right.
You know, and re-remembering as to strengthen and to make sure that we don't lose that.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Sheila.